Yeah, a lot of water's gone under the bridge since they built this one here. And this is old flathead Ford V-8. And in case you're wondering what that is, that, my friend, is the old water injection or fogger. It's not standard equipment. It was a fad back in the 40s and the 50s. And when I was working on cars as a mechanic, as an apprentice mechanic, and I was, of course, at the gas station, and at the gas station, one of the things you have to do as a gas station is check everybody's oil. Well, I would come across these things, and being a young kid, about 18 or 20, I didn't know what it was, you know, and so I asked the owner, you know, what that is there, you know, and he said, oh, that's the old water injection. It was a fad back in the 50s, and this is a 49 Ford right here. And when I'd check in oil, I'd come across these things, not very often, about maybe 1 in 1,000 cars would still have an old, you know, fogger on it. It was soon discovered, like around World War I, that in a foggy day or a rainy day, that if rainwater got into your carburetor, that it would give you a little bit more horsepower and better gas mileage. And it was no secret about it. Salesmen went around gas stations selling these foggers, and the way they worked is, you take this line here, goes to the carburetor, and the other line goes to the intake, or it just goes in there, and it goes down here, or you could wrap it around the exhaust manifold to heat it up. And then a tube goes down here and it bubbles, blub, 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 blub. And the vapor comes up to the top where it just gets sucked into the manifold right there. And you could put a switch on it so that when your car got up to like 40 miles an hour, you could open it up, and then you would have that vacuum right there, you know, and then you would have your water injection. Now, you know, when I was working as an apprentice mechanic back in 75, you know, I talked to Fred, who was the master mechanic, and said, oh, that's the old water injection. Yeah, it'll increase your mileage from, like, he said he had one on his Hudson Hornet, what had a flathead straight six. He said it increased the mileage from like 18 miles a gallon to like 23 miles a gallon. They claim an increase of 5 miles per gallon in gas mileage. And he also went into detail, and he told me, well, he said, you know what, bud, he says, I took the head off of my old Hudson Hornet, and you know, those pistons were shiny, clean, polished, and the valves were all shiny and clean. And you know what that does is what the water does is it cleans your engine while you drive. And the spark plugs, he said, look like brand new. And he said, you put that water injector on there, your spark plugs will last for 100,000 miles because they'll never have oil deposits on them. And so I said, well, how about that then? How come all cars don't have that? He said, well, people were sold on the idea, you know, enthusiasts and hobbyists were sold on the idea, but maybe it's, you know, just another thing to go wrong. It has a vacuum leak because the vacuum, well, as soon as you turn it on, then you have a vacuum leak, and then your motor starts jiggling back and forth, and you have to shut it off so that it doesn't have that vacuum leak on it. It'd be the same as you disconnected your vacuum line. You know, the car is going to jiggle back and forth. It's going to have that hissing sound there. And it really wasn't worth it. With gasoline, like, was 28, you know, cents a gallon. People didn't really care much about improving the fuel economy on it. And we talked to other mechanics about water injection, and they said, well, hydrogen burns and oxygen burns, so why not? You know? So anyway, your HHO system is not going to be that much better than the old prima donna water injection of yesteryear. Back in those days, before the days of electronics, you had a 6-volt car and you wanted it to crank faster, so you put 2 6-volt batteries in it. Then you had a little solenoid on there. When you push the starter button, it would flip it over to 2 6-volt batteries, would send 12 volts to the starter motor to crank it faster. And when you took your finger off the starter button, it would go back to 6 volts with your 6-volt generator. This is a Ford. It was always 12 volts. Now the 6-volt cars were mainly Chryslers, like Chrysler Plymouth, DeSoto, Dodge were 6 volts. Maybe a lot of other cars like Packard and Hudson were 6 volts. I think most of them were. Maybe General Motors was 12 volts, 6 volts, but I think that General Motors probably was 12 volts. But see, back in those days, when you go to a lower voltage, a higher voltage from 6 volts to 12 volts, then you get to use smaller wires, because the lower the voltage, the heavier duty the wire has to be to transmit that much low voltage. You go to like 24 volts, you can use even smaller wires, smaller diameter wires. You'd think it would be the opposite, you know, but it's not how it works. So anyway, have fun with your HHO experimentation, but probably it's been around for maybe 100 years. You know, I hate to put a knock on the HHO enthusiasts, but this will accomplish probably the same results with, you know, like let's say little or no, you know, 25-cent mayonnaise jar, and you're, you know, good to go. Anyway, hey, I'm out of here. Bye now.